Good morning. Uh, Coming to you from our daughter's house this morning. We're down here for a couple of days for Hunter's birthday party celebration, and well, today we look at Exodus chapters 14 and 15, and I've got some glare coming off of my glasses. I hope it's not too distracting. It's from my computer screen. I couldn't figure out how to get rid of it. Yesterday, as the Israelites had left Egypt finally, after the 10th plague, they're on their way in the wilderness, and it tells us that, Moses has taken Joseph's bones along with. And, Joseph had lived to be 110, and the Israelites had been in Egypt for 430 years. So, to realize, both Joseph, there was just bones left of Joseph, and they were taking them as Joseph had requested to bury them with his father's bones that way. But chapter 14 is, the Red Sea crossing. And it's a story that, many people would say it could never have happened. But yet, I've seen photos and images of, this place on the Red Sea where it's shallower and where there are chariot wheels and things like that in the bottom that bring some credibility to this Red Sea crossing that we have in the Bible. And but Moses had, they had led. He was leading the people according to the direction that God had said to go. And they come and they camp, it says, in this certain spot. And it wasn't a real great spot as far as to have any place to flee. And as they were moving, Pharaoh and his officials and everybody came to the realization, we let all these Israelites go. We've got nobody to do the work anymore. They were so dependent upon these Israelites. When you think about 600,000 men, it says, that had fled, the Israelites, that's an awful lot of labor, a lot of people getting things done. And now the Egyptians were going to have to make their own bricks. They were going to have to tend their own flocks. They had to do everything because they no longer had these Israelites there to do all of that work for them. And so God says to Moses, and God again hardens Pharaoh's heart. And, it tells us that in the book, in here in verse 4, God says, then I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and his army, that the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. And sure enough, here we know this story. And, the Pharaoh comes with, it says, he brings 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Egypt with captains over every one. So there's 600 choice chariots plus the other chariots. And, you think 600 chariots, that doesn't sound like a lot against 600,000 men. But, these men of Israel weren't warriors. They didn't have chariots. They were on foot. And, what weapons might they have? But so it wasn't just the 600 choice chariots, but all of the chariots of Egypt with captains of every one. And so, I always picture a chariot as having one person in it, but, when there's captains over every one, maybe, some of them had more than one person in them. But they come, and Pharaoh's army draws near, and the Israelites see them coming and start to, complain, verse 11 of chapter 14. They said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, is that why you took us out here to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt so with us to bring us here out of Egypt? Isn't this what we told you when we were in Egypt? Just leave us alone that we might serve the Egyptians. Here they haven't been free very long, and they don't know how to live as free people. And, they're complaining, we had it so much better when we were in Egypt. And this isn't the first time that they will complain that way. That, it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die here in the wilderness. But Moses says, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. He says, the Lord will fight for you. And then the Lord speaks again to Moses. Why do you cry out to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward. Lift up your hand with your rod and hold it over the stretch it out over the Red Sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry land. And I remember in seeing the movie, that Moses was standing there holding this rod up, and if he started, losing his strength and not, the Red Sea would come back in. But as I read this, when we get to verse 6, God says, stretch out your hand over the sea and the waters will come back. So as I read this, it says Moses raised his hand up, the rod, and the Red Sea parted. And then in verse 26 again, stretch your hand out again. So it wasn't, he didn't have to stand there like that. Because I think, well, how long would it take for 600 people to go across that? And it's not just boom, lickety split, and they were walking. They weren't driving cars driving 60 miles an hour or faster either. So it was quite a process to go across this Red Sea. And the Israelites were going, and they were protected. It tells us, by there was a pillar of fire that God had between the Israelites and the Egyptians, so that the Egyptians couldn't come and attack. They couldn't even get the rear guard of these Jews as the Israelites as they were going. And so the Israelites all get across safely on dry ground. And as the Israelites get across there, finally then God says to Moses, close up, or move your rod again over the sea, and I will close it back up again. And it's just, I think about that crossing of the Red Sea with, how wide an area was this opened up, and again, for 600,000 people, it couldn't have been just a little narrow place that they went one, single file. It had to be, quite a width. And it seems to me I've read somewhere what people thought it was for a width that way. But anyway, it took a while for these people to cross. And this wall of water, I don't know how deep the water was right there, if it was 6 feet or 8 feet or 12 feet or 30 feet, but it, a wall of water. You think about walking through that, if this water is there, it would be pretty intimidating to walk through that wall of water on either side and not knowing, well, what's holding that back, but they did. And then after the Israelites crossed, the waters came back in again, and Pharaoh's army was utterly destroyed. So verse 30 of chapter 14, the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore, and they saw the great work that the Lord had done. So the people feared the Lord. And that word feared means respected, held him in honor. And it says they believed the Lord and his servant Moses. So the Israelites, they've been captive in Egypt for 430 years. Hadn't seen much of this God, Yahweh, this I am. And so when Moses came, and said, God has sent me, who has sent me? I am, is the answer. And so they weren't really used to having God doing a whole lot, with having 430 years of being slaves and servants in Egypt. And so after this exodus over through the Red Sea, there's the song of Moses. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed graciously, gloriously. And he says it's he. Moses doesn't take any credit for it himself, and rightly so. God said, well, hold your hand up with your rod, and the sea will part. Well, Moses didn't do that. We know that. It was only the power of God. And so Moses says, he has triumphed gloriously, and talks about the horse and the rider thrown into the sea, and the captains being drowned, and the depths have covered them, and they sank to the bottom like a stone, And in verse 6, your right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Your right hand has dashed the enemy. So Moses sings this song of praise to God and to God's power and to God's glory. And it's, fairly lengthy, as you, verse 11, who is like you, O Lord, among the gods, And so who is among you is you, O Lord, and the you and O Lord are capitalized, signifying God. And that's, I'm sure I've said this, I know I've said it before, that when you see that word Lord capitalized, it means God. If that word isn't capitalized, it means, like an earthly Lord over the land or something that way. So who is like you, Lord, among the gods? Stipulating that, there is only one God. These other gods are just false gods, fake gods. They can't do anything. And so Moses' song is there, and he ends with, the horses of Pharaoh went with his chariots and his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought back the waters. But the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. And this, and it's just, this story seems unbelievable. But so does the resurrection. So do many of Jesus' miracles. And then we have the Song of Miriam, which the ladies, it says, follow her. And then as they continue to go, they get to an area, 3 days journey, and there's no water to drink. It's bitter water. And they complain, the Israelites complain. Well, I can understand that. You need water to live, you need water to drink. But God gave them water, and then they journeyed a little further and found another place to camp. So this story of the crossing of the Red Sea, as much as it may pull our imagination, shows us the power of God and shows us the length that God is willing to go for his people. And that includes us, right?